It was my birthday yesterday, so I'm of course older, I'm wiser, I'm turning over a new leaf. It's all about positivity. It's all about trade deadline stashes. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name's Josh Lloyd, and move! The lights aren't getting any greener, champ. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Blue Sky, joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and get $20 off your first purchase. Also, go to lockedondaily.com. Over there, you can find the best newsletter for your favorite NBA team. That's lockedondaily.com, and we're always taking the double bangs here and the thumbs and the comments. Live trade deadline show about a week away, Thursday, February the 6th, 1 p.m. Eastern. So normally, I'll give you a couple of things that we want to talk about here. Well, first of all, we're welcoming in, and it's National Draw a Dinosaur Day. So get your Triceratopses out, I guess. What's your favorite dinosaur? I'd love to know. Mine's always been a Triceratops. I guess it's the power of three. The three horns. The short, squat, stout body. The strength, the plates. I like it. Stegosaurus second. But yeah, we're always going Triceratops. Anyway, trade deadline, right? People will ask at Christmas, who are we stashing? Nobody. It's a waste of time in the majority of formats. Most leagues do not have stashability unless you are so far in front of everybody else, or you've got deep benches, or you've got weekly locks, or you've got games caps. Can't do it. You'll lose otherwise. We're a week away now. And I would say that this year at the trade deadline, there are probably fewer stash players that are really showing themselves than there ever has been. Usually be, I think this guy's going to get traded and this guy jumps up, but there's just not that much of it. So I'm going to fold a bunch of stuff in. We're going to talk trade stashes from the deadline. We're going to talk other stashes that might be injury related, tanking related, whatever. We're going to go through every team and look at someone who might be traded and a stash candidate from that team. Some of them will be completely useless, I'm telling you now. Some of them will be okay. But we are at the stage now where if you want to make stashes, you do it now because you do not want to. And I know there is always going to be somebody. And there's people I've gotten into passionate arguments against me. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You're going to lose when you listen to him. Because I'll say in trade deadline week, don't use moves at the start of the week. And people get so upset about that. And one of you will get upset about it. Well, that is horrible advice. Why would you need to save all your moves? Surely just stream in the first 2 days of the week. It's pointless. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'll have this argument every time. You get one extra game or whatever, 2 extra games to start the week. And yeah, you know what? You might not use all of those moves at the end of the week. Who cares? It is 1 week. You were using that to see if there's somebody out there to grab from the trade deadline. You were using that to use streaming options for when players get traded, when the random two-way contract player has to play 40 minutes on one game and you use him for 1 day. That is what you do. It's for the long-term stream value. Plus, once they get traded Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there are gaps in rotations all over the place. That is what you use it for next week. I don't think there's any point in streaming in. There's 10 games on Monday to begin with, right? So that's not really even a streaming day there. You're streaming in for Tuesday and Wednesday? Come on. Again, somebody will fight with me. I know this. I'm sure I'll tweet it out and somebody will have an argument and they'll call me all sorts of names. Just don't use your moves next week. Unless there's something that happens that there is a trade earlier in the week, do it. But don't do it for random one-game streaming. Cool? Cool. Let's start in the NBA's Southeast Division. Going through each team, again, a lot of these won't really matter that much. For the Hawks, I do think that the most likely player to be traded probably is Clint Capella. He is coming off the bench. Larry Nance is back. I don't think it matters that much. Honestly, Capella could be more valuable if he gets traded somewhere, but I don't think this is one of those ones. We know Okongwu's already starting. Okongwu's not a 30-minute-a-night player at this point. Not sure that even matters. But I think Capella's probably the most likely to get traded. In Charlotte, I think it's probably Cody Martin. He can help teams. He can play a 20-minute role off the bench. He can defend. He can pass. Shooting can be iffy. the Hornets have Vucevic and Josh Green, who theoretically can fill those roles, and they'll have other guys they want to try out and give minutes to. So, yeah, maybe it's Seth Curry. I don't think that matters that much either. On Miami, Jimmy Butler has to be the guy that we're talking about as the most likely to be traded. Now, I still think that any of these most likely to be traded, outside of one that we'll talk about soon, is less than a 50% chance of it happening. That's just the nature of trades. And in a lot of these situations, when you're trying to pre-plan stuff out, well, I'll stash this guy because this guy will get traded here. It's useless. It's pointless. You will get it wrong nearly every time. Like, does Jimmy go to Phoenix? I don't know. Do they send him to Milwaukee? Does he go to the one place he doesn't want to go to? Memphis? I got no idea. Does he go nowhere and just doesn't play again? There's just no way of realistically knowing that stuff. Butler has been very disappointing in the minutes that he's played this season. He's only the 80th ranked player in category leagues and 68th in points leagues. He's 21 usage. Like, his steals are at 1.1. He hasn't been trying a lot of the season. We know this. But that doesn't mean that, like, he's necessarily going to be... Like, if he goes to a team like Phoenix and he's the third option, does his 21 usage rise? His 31 minutes almost definitely rise. But then he's at risk of getting hurt. He is a tough one, obviously. But you would think that he'll at least give more effort, maybe, if he goes anywhere else. And that should bump the minutes up. Maybe it bumps the usage up. Maybe it bumps the steals up. But overall, I don't think we're going back to top 20 Jimmy or anything along those lines. If we go to Orlando, I do think the most likely guy to be traded there is Cole Anthony, with Franz and Paolo back, with Mr. Black starting last game over Cole. He's a guy that can be useful to teams as a sixth man, maybe pseudo starting point guard. I guess they could trade off of Mo Wagner, even though I know he's hurt, but that's like a salary relief for certain teams or whatever they're trying to do. I think it's Cole. I don't think there's going to be many moving parts or pieces with the Magic that really matter that much. And then for the Wizards, there could be many names here. It could be Malcolm Brogdon. Could easily be Malcolm Brogdon. Could be Jonas Valanciunas. I'll put Kyle Kuzma here on this list. Obviously, Kuzma has been very, very bad this season. He talks a big game and then he goes and does nothing. And honestly, it's not even worth rostering him in most leagues at this point. Well, no standard leagues at this point, given how he's been playing. Obviously, him going would change a lot, but then we'd have to see what they would bring back. We know the key pieces on this team are Sarr. It's Poole. Yes, it is Poole. It's Carrington. And then it's Bilal. They're the main pieces on this team. So they're the guys they'll prioritize, and there'll be other little bits and pieces come in. So we watch that one. And Kuzma, it would depend on where he goes as to what his role is. But as a third option, like he was on the Lakers when they won the title, not fantasy relevant. He needs to be the guy that he was last season, a incredible on-court negative, but with massive, massive usage and screwing everybody else over on his team. That's how he gets value. If we look at some stash candidates in this division, there are a few of them. Some of them are not necessarily trade-related, and I think that's okay to do it that way. In Atlanta, I've tweeted this out. We've talked about it many times. I've talked about it yesterday on the recap show actually as well, about Jalen Johnson, the risk of him being out for the season, and he is out for the season. We know this. He's out for the year. And the questions are still going to come in. Hey, what do we do now? Who's next up? We've seen him out. We've seen him out for weeks. He had the first shoulder injury, and he was out. And then the second shoulder injury, which is this one, and he's been out. So we've seen it. Now, some of the games that Vic Krejci was really good, Ricochet was out as well. There was a couple where Hunter was out too. I think that Krejci is just a guy to grab. He may not play 35 minutes a night, but he'll play 31, I'm guessing. And I think it'll be him and Ricochet starting at the 3 and the 4. And he's useful enough, Vit, to add in that spot. The question then comes is Ricochet worth it? He's been useless all season. Now, with Johnson out, instead of Ricochet playing 20 minutes, he might play 24. Now, that's enough for deeper leagues. Maybe he improves, and many rookies do. In the second half of the season, after the trade deadline, they get a break at the All-Star break, and that idea of the rookie wall is a myth, by the way. It is not true. Rookies get better the later in the season we go. They get better. So watch for the rest of the All-Star break. We watch Ricochet. Yeah, Krejci's an ad, right? Ricochet is more of a 14-team league guy, but it is conceivable that Ricochet improves, plays 30 a night, and is a 12-team league guy. But he's not there yet. For the Hornets, I've got Josh Okogie there. They've got everyone out today. They could sit many players as we move forward. They already know that Brandon Miller's out. I could have Nick Smith in that role too. I could have Vucevic in that role. But I'm going to put a Kogi there as a stash guy who I think is marginally interesting. In Miami, Nikola Jovic is useful now. Just grab him. Even with Butler, Butler's not on the team now. So again, we know what the Heat are like without Butler. That would be complicated if other players return. But I do think we're getting the idea that Hero, Bam, Ware, and Jovic are their 4 key guys. And that makes him someone to have. In Orlando, I'll put Tristan Da Silva on that list, mainly just because he's getting some extra minutes even with players healthy, and KCP's not really doing much, and Gary Harris is out. So Da Silva looks like he's ahead of a Jet Howard, ahead of Caleb Houston, ahead of Gary Harris. I don't really think this is going to be a 12-team league scenario, but it's worth talking about. And the last one is Justin Champagnie in Washington. Now, we've got to watch his contract status, but if they do trade away players, there'll be open roster spots and he could be converted that way. He's averaging 20 minutes a game this season. He's only the 186th ranked player with 15 usage, but I think there'll be a period, maybe the last 4 weeks of the season, where his minutes rise, his usage rises. He's 186th in -1, like I said. He's averaging 19 fantasy points, 8, 5, and 1 with a steal, shooting 50 and only 64 from the line, weirdly. I wouldn't be massively... Like, you could have him, you could have Keyshawn George, you could have Bub Carrington in these stash groups. Bilal should just be rostered anyway. But Champagnie's, or Jared Butler's the other one. I don't think it'll be him, but he's really close to his 50-game limit as well. But there's a bunch of different players on this squad in Washington that can be useful. So Champagnie's looks sort of there. Again, is he worth holding in a 12-team league? Probably not. Probably not. I don't think he is. I don't think George is. I don't think Carrington is. So, yeah, I'll say probably not for him. We've got 5 more divisions, and maybe this show's going to go longer than I thought. That's okay. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Yes, this is a message from Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. And then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right. TurboTax Live full service. Different to the full service that I'm used to. All right, let's go on to the next division. We are talking the Atlantic Division. Trade candidates there. In Boston, I'll just say it's Xavier Tillman, and it honestly just doesn't matter. So we'll just skip past that one pretty quickly. He barely plays, and their team's ridiculously strong, and I honestly just can't see Boston making any sort of moves that realistically matter that much. I don't think that's going to be a thing, so we'll see. The one we go to next is Brooklyn and Cam Johnson. I'm very certain that Cam Johnson isn't playing a game for the Nets this season. Now, maybe he does. I don't know. We don't know. But they've ruled him out through the trade deadline, basically with this ankle injury, and I don't think he's going to be there. He's playing 32 minutes a night this season. His usage is up to 22. He's a top 65 player in category leagues and top 90 in points leagues. He's been great. He's averaging 19 points a game with 3 threes. Now, you'll notice that he's getting by on that usage, on elite shooting, with no defensive stats, very low rebounds, and very low assists, which is a terrible, terrible recipe for somebody who might move to a better team. I would think that Johnson, if he moves, will end up either droppable or in that 11th, 12th best player on your 12-man roster. Again, he is in a points league, averaging 30 points. That's 86th. Category leagues, he's 61st. It's all great. But I don't see a team bring him in, he averages 19 a game. Or does he necessarily even shoot this well? Or does he get 32 minutes or 33 minutes? I don't think so. I think it's all negative, honestly, wherever Johnson goes. So if you do have Cam Johnson, your sell high window, maybe it's marginally open, but I can't see a good spot that makes him replicate these numbers. For the Knicks, I think when we're talking must roster players and it's not must roster, guys that can be traded, that's what I'm trying to talk about. I think we're going to look at Mitchell Robinson. That's been rumored a lot that they'd love to like upgrade off of Robinson and what he provides as their backup center. We'll see if that's what they end up doing, but he's obviously hurt at the moment. No real time for him to return. And that's wherever Robinson goes, he's going to be so limited in his minutes and his overall just play style and production that it doesn't matter for most people. The Sixers, probably Caleb Martin. I guess you could throw, maybe they would do a blockbuster and move Paul George. I really doubt that. Is it someone like Andre Drummond? I don't know. I think Caleb Martin, if the Sixers decide we're not really doing anything, they could get something back for Caleb Martin on his really team-friendly contract. It might be him, which would open up further things, plus potential injuries for the guy I'm going to talk about soon. And then in Toronto, I think it is the Shark, Bruce Brown. His contract makes it tough because he's overpaid by so much. And then there's all the apron restrictions with other teams. Brown is stepping up into a larger role at the moment. Dickey's struggling. Walter's in the G League. But I also don't think that if Bruce Brown stays in Toronto that his minutes will stay high because I think in the end he'll get shut down. But it could be him that goes. It could be Kelly Olynyk. It could be Chris Boucher. Although I think they want Boucher in the league. They love the Canadian connections. They love that all these guys are from Canada. So if they're veterans, I think they'd like to keep those players. The other one you could look at there is maybe Jakob Poeltl. In terms of stash candidates, what we've seen in Boston is recently Luke Cornett has pulled himself ahead of Tillman and ahead of Neemias Queta. And honestly, he has had games where he's playing better than Al Horford. And if Horford has random rests, Luke Cornett is marginally interesting. Now, this is not a standard league stash. It's one of those ones where you've got the ability in a long bench, a deeper league, that Cornett is going to have interesting startable games. For the Nets, I do believe Noah Clowney is still the preferred stash, but there is a lot of different options there, and it's going to depend who they get back as well. So Clowney, I know he's injured at the moment, so that makes it tougher, right? But it is only just a stash. Zaire Williams could be him. Keon Johnson could be him. I think that D'Angelo Russell and Ben Simmons will struggle to play out the season. I think Cam Thomas will be spotty. So Zaire Williams, Keon Johnson, Tosan Evbuamwan. And if you want to get very deep into the later in the season, the Pimple, Derek Whitehead. I think you'll get some minutes from him, but they are going to be almost a staged stream zone where like one guy is gone. So Cam Johnson's gone, and then D'Angelo Russell might go, and then Simmons is injured, and then Thomas sits out, and then Claxton might get traded. So Day'Ron Sharp's in that mix as well. You might find 7 blokes from the Nets who end up becoming 12-team league adjacent players. Johnson, Williams, Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharp, Tosan Evbuamwan, Derek Whitehead, and then any other random dudes they pick up off the street. If you're used to picking up random dudes off the street, shout out to you. Precious Achiuwa is maybe a stash in New York if they move off Mitchell Robinson because it would just secure his role, but that's a deeper league spot, obviously. And then we go to Philadelphia where, yes, last game it was the mayor, Ricky Council, but Justin Edwards had been prioritized over him. He started over him with Paul George out. He's playing 21 minutes a night. Edwards is a two-way player. He's not doing very much. Like he's averaging 14 fantasy points, 7 points a game in his 21 minutes with 0.8 steals. He's shooting 46 and 62 from the field and from the line. These aren't particularly impressive numbers. But again, if they decide, well, what are we doing here? Where are we going? Are we doing anything? The fact that Caleb might be gone, KJ Martin might be traded or stay injured, Paul George, who knows what's going on with his finger? Who knows about Joel Embiid? There might be a period here where Justin Edwards has use as a steals guy who hits some threes, and there might be an opportunity at some point for him to ramp up some of his usage. I wouldn't feel super strongly about it, but it's there. And then in Toronto, I don't think this is necessarily trade-related, but I think John Mobo. We saw a flash earlier in the season. He's been banished. He's out of the picture. But I do think that and I actually think Ulrich Chomsky will get some starts at some point, but there will be a period, maybe the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season, maybe 4 weeks, where Mobo is a full-time starter, Barnes is hurt, Poeltl's traded or hurt, that we get Mobo starting. He averages 10 and 8, 4 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.2 blocks, 1.3 triples, and that's useful. It is a longer-term stash, and I don't actually think that it's a trade deadline stash. It's one of those ones where it's a fake March injury-type scenario for Mobo. But it's there. It's a thing that I think we are aware of. We pay some attention to that. You could look at Ochai Agbaji if you really wanted to. I wouldn't necessarily feel super good about that because it's Ochai Agbaji, but that is an option that you could look to as well. Maybe, potentially, possibly, who knows? Maybe There's a lot of, that's what I mean. There's a lot of weird teams that I think a lot of the stash stuff is going, and it's another thing, trade deadlines. Most of the time at the trade deadline, what you get are losers, not winners. You don't get guys who are just jumping up in massive value. You might, but often you get losers. Now, that could always change. Like, you might get 5 huge winners this season. And I always recommend holding your ads because it's better to have them than to not. It's better to have them than to, even though the odds might suggest it doesn't happen. Sacrificing an ad for a Tuesday stream is 100% worth it, I believe. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Yes, the NFL playoffs. They're almost done, actually. There's only one game left. And with that one game that's left, well, maybe you can get tickets through the Game Time app. And with Game Time Picks, that is their new feature, it makes getting tickets for events even easier, filtering out the fluff and showing you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can get those tickets through Game Time Picks, plus the all-in pricing so you don't get surprised with fees at checkout. Plus, you've got the fast on-time ticket delivery, the views from your seat, it is all there. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Let's go on to the next division here. We're going to the Central Division. The most likely player to be traded on the Chicago Bulls. You know who it is. Of course it's him. It's the big fella. It's the GOAT, Nikola Vucevic. It could be Zach LaVine. It makes no sense for this team to hold on to Vuce or LaVine, but of course that probably means they do. Vuce has been ridiculously good this season. We know this. He's playing 32 minutes a night. That's about normal. But he's the 25th ranked player in -1, well above where I thought he would be. And that's largely because he's shooting 55% from the field. He's averaging 20 and 10. His usual steal and block numbers are putrid. He's at 3.5 assists, but he's just been shooting the lights out. He had a big slump about 4 weeks ago, and he's turned it back around, and he's playing really well with some weird stuff, with big steals and random block games and random assist games. Part of the reason why I was down on Vuce in the preseason is, A, I don't think he's a very good defender. Obviously not, he's bad. B, I didn't think he'd be this good of a shooter because he never has been. Okay, and he has been that shooter, even though there's been some slumps. But C, it was because I thought there was a massive risk that he would be traded. So I just didn't want to invest in a guy that could just completely disappear and be a 20-minute-a-night guy by the second half of the season. I don't know if Vuce goes, or where he goes, or what the scenario is. Like, even if he goes to like Golden State, for example. They're calling out for a stretch 5, right? Okay, that's great. Vuce is shooting well this season. That's never been what he does. He's never been that level of shooter. I think that the defensive issues with him would be a considerable problem. And then we've got Steve Kerr and the rotations. And he has to play alongside Wiggins and Kuminga when he returns, and alongside Steph in terms of usage. I don't know. It wouldn't be as good to me for Vuce in Golden State. And then other teams might look at him as a reserve player. It's been best case, absolutely, for Vuce. He's been great. But I do think there is a worry here. For Cleveland, I think the probably most likely player to be traded is Isaac Okoro. I almost certain that doesn't have any impact to anybody for fantasy, but okay. For Detroit, I think probably Simone Fontecchio. You could say Malik Beasley, but they really need him. You could say Tim Hardaway. That would make a lot of sense. But I actually think they believe they need him, which is probably half the battle for half of this stuff. So Fontecchio, I thought he might be used a lot more this season. He has not been. You could argue that they should trade Tobias Harris. That is just not going to happen. They will not be able to get anything back off that contract. It won't happen. So I think it is Fontecchio. It doesn't really matter that much. It just would, if they didn't get anything back that was usable, it would open up more minutes for Ron Holland in that spot, who's an interesting name to watch. In terms of the Pacers, Obi Toppin maybe, but that's contract's horrendous, so I don't really know who would take that on. Maybe someone who's just looking for a little bit of spacing on the second unit. I'm not sure. Toppin's role is obviously not very strong in Indiana. I know people will say Miles Turner. I don't know why they would do that. They have the East's best record in January. They are pushing for the playoffs again. There is literally no backup on this team that is good. Thomas Bryant is terrible. You would have to get another center back in a trade if you traded away Miles Turner and other stuff. And they're not a rebuild team, the Pacers. And I know they might not sign Turner in the offseason. That's true. He might be too expensive for them, whatever. I don't believe they will trade him. Things can always change, but I do not believe that. The last one is the Bucks. I think it is relatively obvious that the player that is most likely to be traded there is Pat Connaughton. He's not in the rotation. He's not good. They need to move off of him to be able to get themselves under, I think it's the second apron, to enable them to be able to pull off more moves. So where it doesn't matter where he goes or not, he's not good and he's not going to play. Unless maybe he found his way to like Utah, for example, and then like for 2 weeks he starts and plays 35 minutes, then would be interested. But I think he's the most likely player to be traded. In terms of stash guys from the Central Division, it has to be, to me, it has to be Sticks. Has to be Jalen Smith. What I was told about Jalen Smith in the offseason was the reason that he chose a very similar contract to what he could have got in Indiana. The reason he chose that contract and going to Chicago is he believed he had an opportunity to be a starter. He obviously did not beat out Vooch, but is there a chance they don't play Vooch? Is there a chance they trade Vooch? I don't know. They are a confusing organization. But Smith has that great fantasy profile. And if we're talking about stashing guys, some of these guys, it's not really worth it. This one is. Because if it hits, if Vooch goes and Smith is a starter and plays 29 a night, he will have bad games, without question, bad games. But he would be a top 70 sort of a player. Smith, in 15 minutes a night this season, is averaging already 18 fantasy points on 21 usage. He's averaging 8 and 5.5. He's just at 0.7 blocks, but look, those numbers could all double. Let's just double them. Let's make it 16, 11, 1.5 blocks, shooting 46 and 83, 1.5 assists. Right, easy top 60. This is one that you stash. The easiest stash at this point. One of the best ones out there, I think. It very, very much could not work. But it's one of those ones where I go, oh, I know this guy's got good fantasy value. I know that subbing centers or point guards is the easiest one-for-one subs in NBA. And he's a center. So that's what we look at. That's what we look at. Whereas you lose a 3 or a 2 or a 4. If you lose a shooting guard, well, a point guard can play that position. A small forward can play that position. You lose a small forward, it can be a 2. It can be a 4 that play that position. You lose a 4, a center might push down. A 3 might push up. We get 6 extra minutes to 4 different players. You lose a center, the backup center plays. You lose a point guard, the backup point guard plays. So that's usually, when we're talking trades and stashes, they're the positions with the best upside return value. In Cleveland, Max Strus is starting at the moment. We know that maybe Okoro could get traded. Maybe LeVert's injury is worse than expected. And Dean Wade is out for a long time now. I don't think Strus has particularly high upside. But part of my reason to be against Strus was A, he didn't have high upside. But B, there was too many guys around. Well, one of those guys is gone at the moment in Wade. LeVert is out. Okoro is out and might be dealt. So that helps Strus. That is interesting enough at the moment for Max. I put Ron Holland there for Detroit. I think it'd be really hard for them to play him and Assar together. But there could be some openings if Fontecchio goes. I would just like to see him play a little bit more. I think he's shown some flashes. I think he's still going to be a pretty solid player. And look, this is just deep league stuff. For Indiana, I'll put Jarris Walker there. Hello. Because, he's interesting. But the chances of that working out, of what's his name, like Toppin moving on and Walker is now your backup 4, and then Siakam gets hurt, or Nesmith gets hurt, and Walker finds out how to shoot. They're all really, really small chances, right? But I think because at the moment he's basically on the out of the rotation, there is a chance that if moves are made, he can move back in. I wouldn't bank on it. And the last one there is Gary Trent, whose minutes are up. Big Boom AJ Green's been hurt. Pat Connaughton could be moved on from. Maybe Trent is able to establish a level of consistency. I'm definitely not going to bank on that. But maybe he can establish some consistency. Not that interested. Let's go Western Conference. Let's go to Dallas. And the name that I put up the top of this list, and I know that you think this sounds dumb, and it does a little bit, but I think Daniel Gafford is at risk of being traded. And here is my reasoning. It is very clear that Derek Lively is a better player than Daniel Gafford. Someone's going to disagree. I know. Shout out to you that disagrees and tells me Gafford's great. Thank you. Good to see you guys here. Love that you're here. All right. Even if you believe that Gafford is better than Lively, whatever, Dallas does not. Dallas does not believe that. So when Lively eventually returns, he will start over Gafford once he's ramped back up, right? The idea that at the moment they've got no Kleber, there's no Lively. Dwight Powell is hurt, so the only center they've got is Gafford, and I don't know how good he actually is at that role, right? He's fine. But the thing is, if they trade for another center, the name that's been whispered at times is Miles Turner. I don't believe it, right? Don't believe it. Miles Turner. But what if they bring in Miles Turner and then there is Daniel Gafford and then there is Derek Lively? That makes no sense. You're going to re-sign Turner with Lively there already and Gafford there? Like, what do you do then? It's too many centers. It doesn't make sense to have those resources there. So what I think that if they did decide they were going to pull a deal for Miles Turner, and Indiana was like, oh, okay, they just send Gafford back. Turner would play 35 minutes in Dallas. You'd piece together the backup spot somehow. But Gafford, because again, Gafford is not a long-term starter. Lively's their guy, and then they'd figure out what they do with Turner and Lively moving forward. Maybe they could play them together. Who knows? But if they did make a move for a center, I know it sounds stupid to trade away a center, but I think that it would make sense to get an upgrade at that position. And if it is Indiana, well, they would need a center back. For Houston, I put Jeff Green there. I don't think they trade Dylan Brooks. I don't think they trade Fred VanVleet. There is an outside chance of VanVleet just because of the contract structure. Don't think so. They're not trading Jalen Green. They're not trading Amen Thompson. They're not trading Cam Whitmore, maybe. I don't think so. It's Jeff Green, but even Jock Landale, even then, doesn't really matter. For Memphis, I'll put John Conchar there. It could be Luke Kennard, although he's playing really well at the moment. They sort of need to consolidate some of their roster spots down. I don't think that no matter what happens in Memphis, they need to trade 3 guys away to really open up enough consistent minutes for somebody coming in to have value. So I don't think it really matters. For New Orleans, I am going to go with Brandon Ingram. I could throw other names. It could be Zion. Don't think so. Could be CJ. It should be. But I think Ingram still remains somewhat likely. It's probably overall unlikely, as many trades are. Because it's just who he is, the type of player he is. He's not playing. He wants his max deal. No one wants to give it to him. He has been better than I expected this season. Top 50 in points leagues, Ingram, 53rd in -1. But of course, there's all context behind this. Because part of the reason I was down on him is that if DeJounte and CJ and Zion were all there, Ingram just wouldn't get to do enough. And of course, that in the games that Ingram played, those guys weren't there. So he was able to do enough. He put up 22, 5.5, and 5. He had his usual subpar defensive numbers. He was pretty good from the line. He hit decent amount of threes, better amount of threes. I think wherever he gets traded to, if that does even happen, it would probably be better than I expected in the preseason, but worse than what we've currently gotten, would be my guess if that does happen to go down. In San Antonio, I'll put Keldon Johnson there. Now, it could be Chris Paul. It could be Harrison Barnes. It could be Zach Collins. They're obviously involved in discussions around De'Aaron Fox. Who knows what happens? There's a lot of moving pieces there. I'll put Keldon Johnson there, but he would need to go to a bad team to be a 32-minute-a-night player to be really relevant at all for fantasy, and I don't think that's going to happen. Stash guys in the Southwest. In Dallas, I'm going to go with Olivier Maxence Prosper. He has been pushing up a little bit of late, not enough to get me fully ready to go, but it's at least eye-opening for deeper leagues. And if they do decide to go small with PJ at the 5, and that's their solution instead of trading for another center, then Prosper plays more at the 4. Now, Marshall being out has probably helped him, but he's at least shown some flashes. Again, deeper league stuff. For the Rockets, I say Cam Whitmore, they would need to move off of somebody to get him there, or Jabari doesn't return, or Whitmore himself gets traded. Seems very unlikely. Whitmore, again, much like Keldon Johnson, he's a much better prospect than Keldon, and he's got way more scoring ability, but he would need to go to a bad team, give him 25 usage, play 28 minutes, and let's roll from there. On Memphis, I'll say Jalen Wells. Not that I think that he's going to blow up, but there's 2 reasons for Wells. Rookie, so get better as the season goes on. Maybe there's a consolidation trade. Maybe instead of fluctuating between 21 and 28 minutes, he locks in at 29. He gets a little bit more of the ball. They show a little bit more confidence in him. Again, this is not one that's a huge deal. And then in New Orleans, I'm going to go with the Namur legend, Jordan Hawkins. He is very much a points and threes guy. He's averaging 11 points with 2 threes. He's playing 23 minutes a night already. He averages under 18 fantasy points. He's shooting poorly. He does nothing else. But if they're in a situation where CJ is hurt or traded, if Ingram is hurt or traded, Zion is hurt or traded, like Hawkins is going to step up. BJ Boston's already at his games limit basically, so they're holding him out of games. And I think they'll convert him eventually, and him and Hawkins will have opportunities. But Hawkins needs 3 guys out, 2 guys out, which could happen. He needs to get a lot of shots. Again, which could happen. But he's also one of those players that if he doesn't get those things, he's completely useless. Even though he'll have a couple of flash games. And then for San Antonio, I'll put Steph Castle there. Now, Castle has not been very good from a fantasy perspective at all. He's had plenty of opportunities. His shooting is horrendous. He doesn't get enough of any of the other peripheral stats. But what if he is a part of a deal that brings De'Aaron Fox in? Does he go out in that deal? Is it Chris Paul? I don't know what they do. If he found his way to another team and played 30 minutes, If he went to Sacramento, I don't think he would because A, he's a rookie point guard, B, he is bad, and they still, I'm guessing, want to try and compete, and he would not allow that to happen. But he's a name to watch just in case. Maybe he moves to a third team in some sort of deal. Because we've seen a couple of flashes, a couple of high usage flashes. I'm not super in on it, but we have seen a little bit there. Again, he's had opportunities, and he hasn't succeeded in them. Let's go to the Northwest Division. For Denver, I'm going to go with the poop cookie, Michael Porter Jr. Remember, I don't know, a few weeks ago, it was all the rage that Michael Porter Jr. was getting traded for Zach LaVine. Remember that? Remember that trade that was going to happen? Now, we, as a general basketball/fantasy community, I'm sure many of you have just forgotten that. You go, oh yeah, I remember that. Right? Because people chuck this stuff out, these trade rumors out, they don't happen, and they fizzle away. And if they ever hit one and get it right, well, then you hear that they got it right. So it's when I say don't overreact to trade rumors, like Miles Turner being traded. Don't overreact to these things. It's because the vast majority of them go nowhere. Nothing happens. I got questions. What do I do? Hey, what happens to Porter if he goes to Chicago? Value up? What? Doesn't happen. I'll put him there because I don't really know who else they'd be moving on from. But I really don't think that he's going to be moved. While his upside is capped in Denver, he's very important to what they do. But it's just another one of those illustrations of, yeah, just be very cautious about believing rumors that you see in Sports Illustrated or Fansided or Bleacher Report. Most of the time, it's someone just wanking themselves off over a dream they had or a wish that they've got. Joe Ingles from Minnesota. I couldn't really find a good trade guy. They're not trading Conley or Alexander Walker. DiVincenzo will come back. They're not trading. I don't think they're trading Gobert. Actually, they can't trade Gobert with his contract, so that won't happen. Julius Randle, maybe, but honestly, he's playing better. I don't think they do. So, maybe Ingles, but I don't think much goes on there. For the Thunder, it could be Aaron Wiggins, it could be Isaiah Joe, but I'll just put Usman Jeng there. They've got so many draft picks, they can just give Jeng to a bad team. They can put a draft pick on there. They can bring Cam Johnson across if that's what they wanted to do. They could bring whoever they wanted to, like Malcolm Brogdon, to be a ball handler in the second unit to the Wizards. And then Jeng would be interesting because if he went to a bad team and they just said, all right, let's see what you got, I could see it working. A little bit similar to the way that Trey Mann happened in Charlotte last season. Did nothing, rotted in Oklahoma City, went to the Hornets, and was pretty solid. Same with Micic. So that's one we watch. The trade candidate for the Portland Trailblazers, well, there's numerous names we could throw there. The big three names are Anthony Simons, which they should, don't think they will. DeAndre Ayton, which is going to be very hard to do. And the next one is Jeremy Grant, who, let's be honest, has been bad again. Grant is playing 32 minutes a night. He's not a top 130 category league guy. He's the 129th points league player, averaging 25 points a game. He's at 14 and 3.5 rebounds. 0.8 steals and a block, shooting 38 and 84. It's horrendous. I don't think you even roster him in 12-team leagues. Honestly, pointless. He's also out now with an ankle injury. Whether a team fools themselves into trading for him, I don't know. Whether Portland continues to be stubborn and doesn't trade him, I don't know. But I also think that wherever he goes, the opportunity that he has in Portland is probably the largest opportunity he will have. So I don't think that actually boosts him up. So if he is out, all it does is open up stuff for Denny Avdia, Tamani Kamara, Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp. And then as those guys start to get whittled away later on, it becomes Chris Murray, Justin Minaya, whatever other nonsense they're trying to get out there. In Utah, I think Colin Sexton is probably most likely to be traded. It could be the Baptist John Collins. I think Sexton's probably a more useful player to teams. Collins is one of those guys. Again, he was played 22 minutes off the bench until Taylor Hendricks got hurt this season. And then he started and he showed what he can do. He can get points and rebounds and he shot the ball well. But overall, he's not a particularly winning player. I know that sounds harsh, but I think that's the right read on what Collins is as an NBA player. So I'm not really sure he's going to go anywhere. Sexton could be useful. A guard who can handle the ball, who can shoot a bit, who can play 25 off the bench for a good team. That would kill Sexton's value in 12-team leagues, but I think it's a possibility. Stash candidates for this Northwest Division. I'll go with Julian Strouder, just in case Michael Porter is traded, but they would likely bring somebody good back. But if they consolidated and send two guys out, well, Strouder might go to 26 minutes, and he could be a 15-point guy with 3 threes. It's very, very unlikely. In Minnesota, I say Rob Dillingham just in case he actually improves as the season goes on. Mike Conley gets hurt, busted up, DiVincenzo's out, and they have to use Dillingham. I think they'd probably still use Alexander Walker, but it would mean more for Rob. This is more just like you're stashing for development, and you're hoping that he gets into a larger role. I don't think it happens. For the Thunder, I put Cason Wallace there, the old Hong Kong mattress. Carson's getting minutes at the moment at a pretty solid level. He's getting steals at a really high level. What you want is more consistency in the playing time, but also consistency in the usage. It hasn't been there. Maybe it sticks. Maybe it improves. I don't know, but he's available in a lot of spots, and I think he's worth having. Next up, in Portland, again, there are many different ways that we can approach the Blazers in terms of who is the value play, who is the stash guy. And yeah, yesterday, it was really bad for Donovan Clingan. Because again, I will reiterate this, and I think this is really important. He is not good. He is not a good player at all at this point. Might he become good? Maybe. I'm not sure. He might. But he's actually not good. And Chauncey Billups is playing it as if he's not good, because he's not. He's playing limited minutes behind Ayton. I do think that if Ayton is out, that Clingan will get first shot over Rob Williams. He's played only 17 minutes a night this season, Clingan. He's still 156th in category leagues and 212th in points leagues. He's got great fantasy potential. He's averaging 5 and 6.5 with 1.6 blocks. Let's double it. 34 minutes is unrealistic. Let's add 50% on. Let's make him 7 points. Let's make him 10 rebounds. Let's make him 2.2 blocks on 53% field goals, which can actually rise. So with a week to go, and it might be longer, waiting for shutdowns, not trades, I think he's worth stashing. But if you are fighting for the playoffs in fantasy, this man at the moment is not contributing. He'll contribute if somebody is out, if Ayton is out, but in his 12 bench minutes, he's not good enough. So that's really just going to depend on how much of a barrier you've got. And then for the Jazz, I could tell you Isaiah Collier and Keontae George, you just roster those guys. Collier's, I think, a really easy one. But if I'm going to go a little bit deeper, I think it's Kyle Filipowski. Although, Drew Eubanks is a name there as well. He's been starting in place of Kessler. The one I've got is Kyle Filipowski, who it's been up and down. His fantasy game should be as solid, even though he's not blocking any shots for some reason in the NBA. But there are other names in the way, like old mate Michael Potter. Potter's started the last few games. Cody Williams is now out. It's going to be messy, obviously. And I'd much rather have Collier, but again, in most leagues, he's been grabbed. But if he hasn't, you grab him. But Filipowski's one that it's not a trade deadline one necessarily. It might take a little bit longer for us to get there. Now we'll go to the final division, the Pacific Division. Golden State, obviously a very, very frustrating team in terms of trying to predict fantasy numbers. It's all over the shop. They've made their trade already this season. Getting Dennis Schroeder didn't work very well. I think Gary Payton is probably the most likely player to be traded, and that will just open things up for Moody, for Waters, for Pajemski, who just should be grabbed, by the way, now. Pajemski, grab him now. Maybe. On the Clippers, I'll say Kevin Porter Jr., but who wants him? Nobody. No cap. Who wants him? No, again, nobody. And tell what I hate? You want a sidebar rant? When the Clippers post something out, way to go, Scoot. Scoot? What? Yeah, because his nickname is Scoot. Okay. I'd call him something like Campbell's or something like that. Do you know why? We'll talk about it later. But yeah, I hate it. They call him Scoot. I go, Scoot? What are you talking about, Scoot? Yeah, terrible nickname. It shouldn't be his nickname. There's a better Scoot already, my guy. Could he be traded? Sure. For the Lakers, Rui Hachimura is who I put there. They allegedly continue to want centers because now that AD is hurt, by the way, Jackson Hayes is worth the stream for now. Maybe they trade for somebody. You're going to hear a lot of outrageous comments from Lakers fans. Oh, look how good our lineup is. We'll have Miles Turner. Yeah, we'll just give them Rui and that'll be a straight swap. That's easy, yeah? No. I know you're the Lakers and you think you're entitled to everything. No, it doesn't work that way. You will not do that, and that won't happen. Hachimura is bad. He would need to go to a team, like a few names that I've mentioned already, that would give him 34 minutes a night, let him have 26 usage, let him bomb away on horrible mid-range shots, and he gets lucky with a hot streak of shooting, and you get value that way. I think the most likely to be traded player on the Suns is Bradley Beal. It's obviously a toxic situation there. Trading Yusuf Nurkic is really tough, given his contract, really tough. It could be somebody else. Beal obviously holds all the cards, but if he's just like, I like the spot and I want to go, well, that's okay. I still think this is really unlikely. He's been quite bad. Despite how bad he's been, he's still 93rd in -1 rankings. He's 94th in points leagues. I thought in the 70s or 80s he was a decent draft pick, and he's been behind that. His drop-off has been ridiculous. He can't hit free throws for some reason. His assists are down. He's averaging just 17 points. This is one of those ones where people tried to argue with Nick Richards. When you go to play with better players, you play better. Yeah, not always. It doesn't always happen that way. I know they're different players. Doesn't always happen that way, though. Yeah, Beal, I think, most likely to be traded. And I think almost anywhere he went, it would be a better spot for him than what's currently happening now in Phoenix. And then for Sacramento, I'll just put De'Aaron Fox there. It could be Kevin Huerter, but all these rumblings coming out now, again, this is less than 50% chance of happening, but all the rumblings coming out now suggest that they're talking Fox trades. If Fox is traded, who knows what happens? Who comes back? Is it Castle? Is it Paul? Is it a different team involved? Is it straight up for Fred VanVleet? Not sure how the money works. Don't know. So it's always, with these sort of trades, it's very, very hard to like, well, this player's gone, therefore this guy steps up. Doesn't really happen that way. They could easily just start Malik Monk at point guard as well and bring Keon Ellis to be the starting shooting guard. Easier possibility too. Kevin Huerter would be the other name because he's just not in the rotation and maybe they try and recoup something from him. I don't know. I don't know if they've got any first-round picks that they can like attach to try to dump off of players that you've done in the past, or second-round picks like they do as well, and they continue to be a horribly, 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 horribly managed franchise. Let's look at stash candidates from the Pacific Division. Again, there's some of these ones that aren't really useful, but Moses Moody in Golden State playing well at the moment. It does help that Kuminga is out, and that's probably the only realistic scenario that keeps Moody just sort of chugging along. Don't really believe it as something you need to really sit on. Amir Coffey, in case Kawhi is hurt, you got Derek Jones who could fill that spot as well. Although Jones, I'm guessing, has been grabbed in a lot of different spots. It may be Coffey, but again, we're talking deep league stuff. Max Christie is interesting to me. I know that he doesn't play the same position as Anthony Davis, so yeah, Jackson Hayes is great to grab now. But we saw earlier when Davis was out, Christie just did more. His usage went up, and he was very, very solid. And I don't believe that Christie has been a 12-team league guy. I do believe Max Christie is a grab now. Now, it might do nothing. He might still do nothing in the starting unit, and maybe they go to more Dalton Connect. Or maybe it is just Jackson Hayes. But it's Jackson Hayes and Anthony Davis will not have the same usage. Christie will be able to do it. Finney Smith won't ramp up his usage. Hachimura? Maybe he will, but that's not a good idea. So, Christie's who I like. Him and Hayes are guys to grab. I think in Phoenix, Grayson Allen, depending on what they do, like if they have to consolidate players down, they make other moves. If Allen played 31 a night or 30 minutes a night, we'd be interested in 12-team leagues. But we're not there yet. Royce O'Neal, you could maybe argue he's starting with Ryan Dunn out. Dunn might be back in the next game, and then it limits that. They're still a pretty weird team. And then the next one, the obvious one, is Sacramento. It's Keon Ellis. Ellis, if he plays 25 a night, it's a must-roster 12-team league guy. He's averaging 22 minutes a night this season, and that makes him 152nd. His usage is incredibly low, 13%, and I don't know that that would change. He averages 8 points a game. His value comes from 1.4 steals, 1.6 threes, 0.8 blocks. He's a good shooter on low volume. I don't know that I trust that fully in larger scale, but he's okay to have now on hold and see what happens. But it is also very possible that Fox is traded, Monk is there, and then Paul and Castle come back, and it's actually worse for Alice as two guards come into the rotation. That's absolutely possible as well. So it's fine to have Alice now and see where it goes, but like all of these ones, there's no certainty in any of these moves. That is 6 divisions, 30 teams, stash candidates, trade candidates. Some teams have nothing that really makes sense. Some have players that are somewhat useful. Like, I think we're stashing guys. The ones that we're really interested in, Jalen Smith, because that's a very easy one-for-one. Keon Ellis, pretty solid option there. Donovan Clingan, not bad. Not bad. I'm not going to be fully enamored with that, but it's not bad. Jordan Hawkins, maybe. Justin Edwards, again, maybe. The Brooklyn mess. Josh Okogie, that's an interesting one in Charlotte. There's and Nikola Jovic, a good one in Miami as well. There's a lot of random ones. I think for majority of them, outside of maybe even just Alice or Smith, not including the injury benefit Vic Krejci or Max Christie right at the moment, which I think we just grab anyway, and Isaiah Collier, who's already been a rosterable guy. I'm not sure how many guys get their value tweaked up enough. But that's what we're here to find out. Guys, this is... I didn't even mention this as part of the show. I'm replacing the regular waiver wire show with this show today. So there's no actual waiver wire show that's happening today. It's just this one. It took a long time to do. I hope that it was useful for you guys. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you enjoyed the names. I hope you enjoyed disagreeing with the names. Think about you and what you've done. And let's, again, find a good thing. What was the good thing? Good fantasy move? That's okay. That's small, whatever. Nice dinner. Took your family out. did something good at work, closed the big deal. There's always something positive. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.